We are starting on question 3.4. I'm just going to go ahead and start drawing out everything. You're pretty familiar with the regular graph, regular demand curve. I know that this is 120. I also know that technically the marginal revenue is equal to 120 minus 2Q, which is important for drawing the marginal revenue line. Marginal revenue line starts at the same place. Here we're given a marginal cost is constant, which is kind of nice, kind of handy. So we'll just draw a marginal cost here, and why don't we go ahead and we label that 10 so we kind of have an idea. Now, for the most part, when a tax falls on a monopolist, it shifts the supply curve back, but there is no real supply curve here. So actually, first, let me go ahead and draw in some of the fundamentals of this monopoly. This monopoly is currently producing at QM. This is before the tax. And when it produces at QM, it looks like it'll produce price monopoly. If you want to solve that out, you're really just setting 10 equal to the marginal cost and then solving for the quantity, plugging that quantity back in the demand curve, and that'll give you the true price. So it's important you know how to get the price, how to get the quantity. Please practice it on your own. However, I want to talk about what's this idea, right? If they impose a very specific tax, then that tax will shift the supply curve, even though there is no real supply curve, up. So now we'll have a new marginal tax line. I'll draw it in a kind of a thinner line, but that one is definitely up at 20. It went up by the value of the tax. Now we take this 20, right? We take this 20 and we're going to plug it in as the new marginal cost. And when we set marginal cost equal to marginal revenue, it'll give us the new monopoly output. So this line now intersects, red is the new now, this new marginal cost intersects the original marginal revenue at what is Q with the tax, a new taxable quantity. That taxable quantity has a much higher price. That price is the price of the tax. So let me erase some of these lines and let's actually start to figure it all out together so that you understand where some of these numbers are coming from. All right, so what are we doing here is the question is asking us what is the incidence of tax on the consumer? So I understand that that can be a little bit confusing. So let's figure out some of the variables here. The first big one is certainly this idea of what is QM. QM is the quantity that the monopoly originally made. So that's essentially saying 10 equals 120 minus 2Q. It's 110 divided by 2, 55. Now the quantity with the tax is the other important thing. So the quantity with the tax is something we can assume based on the idea of 20 being equal to 120 minus 2Q. So I believe that it's just 50. So the quantity fell by, in each instance, just a set of 5. So if you're like, David, where'd you get those numbers from? That was how I acquired them. So I'm actually going to put them in right now. So the monopoly, after incurring the tax, shifted it back. So let's now figure out the price, right? Because we can also figure this stuff out now too. The original price was based on 55. If 55 was the quantity, then we would do 120 minus 55. I'm going to do a little bit of math in my head, so forgive me if I get this wrong. 100, that would be 65. But then what happened is the monopolist dropped it back to a quantity of 50, and 120 minus 50 is 70. Excellent. So hopefully that makes sense. It's a linear demand curve. Makes a little bit of sense to me. If you have any questions, we'll double back. If my math wasn't perfect, totally my fault. I'm kind of doing this a little fast today. So now we have an idea of the new price and the new quantity. We can talk about what is the incidence of the tax on the consumers. So what they're really asking us there is how much of this tax did the monopolist pay? And actually, hopefully it is a little, oh, I erased the tax line. So this is the new marginal cost. This was the old marginal cost. Kind of represents the supply line if you want to think about it that way. So the producer, and I'll use a green line for this, the producer is paying the marginal cost at that price. So the producer is currently paying the marginal cost intersects the marginal revenue right here. So this is the quantity that they're producing. So this whole shebang is the incidence of the tax that falls on the producer. Then how much did the price rise by? Well, the price for the consumer rose by 5. So this number right here is probably not most accurately represented by 20. So the specific tax is $10 per unit. If we know the price went up from $70 to $65, we know the consumer is automatically bearing $5 of that cost, while the producer is increased his personal cost by 5 as well. Now that 5 isn't really represented so well here because the original, that's just the marginal cost. It doesn't fully reflect the total cost faced by the producer. We'll see this again and we'll go over it a little bit. I don't want to go too long on this video. I want to try to keep it at 10 minutes. So if you're looking at the incidence of the tax, you can really just look at how much the price went up for the consumer. And we'll